All right, well, so I am Bill Sherman. I know a lot of people were asking who the heck is speaking next week, who's this guy? So we were supposed to have the Lieutenant Governor, as you saw the title slate up a second ago. He couldn't make it, so I'm filling in for a fill-in today. Doesn't matter, it'll be a good presentation, and we're going to take you through the Department of Culture, Recreation, and Tourism. First off, I'd like to thank Shard, Richard, Sherry, and everybody with the Rotary of Baton Rouge for stepping up and saying, sure, come on, Bill, and letting this happen here today on short notice, and appreciate that, Shard. I love Shard's name, Shard, Richard. Kind of wanted to rename myself Bill, Rebill, but I found out about this last week, and it just so happens that, first off, I just want to say Lieutenant Governor wanted to be here. He did. His schedule is hectic. He's like the Energizer Bunny, as you know. He's in New Orleans today attending a funeral and a few other things, so he couldn't make it. So I know he would rather be here at Baton Rouge Rotary. Like most politicians, they love a microphone. But what I wanted to say was that last week I was having lunch with my good friend Fred here. Fred and I share lunch once a week at Cafe Mimi downtown. And I was walking into Cafe Mimi and he goes, Bill, we got to talk. He says, I just saw this email. You're speaking next week. I said, yeah, Fred. And he says, man, I got to ask you a few questions. First off, what are you wearing? I said, Fred, I'm going to dress up. It'll be nice. He said, Fred, he said, Bill, you going to give a PowerPoint? I said, yeah, I'm going to give a, he says, don't give a lot of data, numbers, and all this. Make it visual. I said, no, Fred, I got this. I got this. He says, keep them entertained. It's a big group, Bill. Don't mess it up. I said, Fred, give me your hands, baby. Give me your hands. I said, Fred, is this right? I said, Fred, I got this. I know he doesn't want me to screw up, or he doesn't want me to, make a cringeworthy event up here. These guys don't want it, but most of all, I don't want that to happen. So I know you come from the heart. Thank you, and I appreciate your support. All right. So that's it. Louisiana is a trip. We know this, right? Yep. For the next 20 minutes, we're going to suspend all the issues in Louisiana as far as traffic, crime, all that. We're going to talk about the highlights, all right? Some good news, all right? And I know we're in that time period right now between kickoff on September 4th and August. So this is just all filler, basically, right? We're all waiting for about another month. In the meantime, I'm going to share a little bit why Louisiana is a trip. The state of tourism, it is coming back. Whether or not you know it, it is coming back. This past year, 2021, we actually saw 46 million visitors come back to Louisiana. And that's not the numbers we had pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, but it is coming back. Visitors, and why do you care about the visitation? Well, visitors spend a lot of money here. They keep our restaurants in business, our hotels, they keep Drusilla Seafood right here hopping. Visitors are really critical, you all know that. Also, they spend tax dollars. That's tax dollars you and I don't have to spend. It's about $1,000 off of our bottom line per Louisiana resident, per taxpaying resident that we don't have to spend, saving about $1,100. Tourism is the fourth largest employer in the state. And when I say tourism, I mean hospitality and leisure. And that's all your restaurant workers, your hotel workers, your attractions. It is a major employer. Now, wages may not be the best, and we're working on that, but tourism it's critical to Louisiana. And when I say Louisiana is a trip, and I know other states have tourism, but I guarantee you, when it stacks up against Kansas, Wyoming, some of these, the Dakotas, other states, I think we are far and above much better, a lot more to offer. So how are we bringing these visitors back? Well, of course, we have the new Orleans airport. We have our welcome centers back open. We also unveiled something called the Sunshine Plan, where during the pandemic, we just focused on people having staycations. You may have seen some of these staycation videos. Go see something in your backyard you hadn't seen before. As opposed to flying and taking these destinations with all these mandates in terms of the COVID protocols. So we've been getting the people back to Louisiana. It's slow, but they're coming back. In fact, the Lieutenant Governor said it'd be about 4 or 5 years before we get everybody back. Actually, the numbers are proving that we're getting them back a little bit quicker, according to some of those numbers. So why are they coming back to Louisiana? As y'all know, we have a lot to offer. Let's see if we have audio.
There's something different about Louisiana, and that something is everything, which is probably why we've heard more than one visitor say, Louisiana is a trip.
Thank you.
Is it something in the air here? Yes. It's called jazz and zydeco, Cajun and brass. It's the sound of one-of-a-kind musical moments that remix your molecules and feed your soul. Then there's the exotic nature of our nature. Wetlands and wildlife that'll take your breath away, but give you so much more in return.
Here we go. It was, yeah, trust me, it was a good spot. Just didn't quite work out, didn't finish. Another thing we're doing as far as bringing people back to Louisiana, many of y'all already know, we had a couple of parades, national parades we hadn't taken part before. Louisiana knows how to do a Mardi Gras. We know how to do a float. Both Macy's on Thanksgiving Day and the Rose Bowl parade were huge hits. If you recall, this was Thanksgiving morning, the big alligator that apparently was one of the longer floats ever in Macy's history. That was a 3-year contract we had signed with this event company out of New York. And the lieutenant governor was really big in wanting to make sure that it stood out. You know, we know how to do floats, we know how to do Mardi Gras, or at least festivities like this. So this gator crawled down the streets of New York, and of course we had John Baptiste, who was our ambassador, who rode. They won't let a lot of people ride, but John Baptiste ended up winning 5 Grammys about a month later. So great ambassador. If you know him, he's you know, talks up Louisiana all the time. This was a hit, and again, we will be back next year. It'll be, I think, a different parade. I mean, a different float in New York City, if I'm not mistaken. But this was a huge hit. And then on the other side of the country, on New Year's morning, January 1st, we also signed into contract for the Rose Bowl parade. And this is the Rose Bowl here. That was a fabulous float. Now you're seeing pictures of it with all the streamers. They had all this confetti, but it really was a nice float, beautiful float. Won a couple of awards. We had ambassadors from Lane Hardy. We had a Teacher of the Year. We had Policeman of the Year, Volunteer of the Year. Billy didn't want to ride. He wanted to make sure some of our local heroes, a nurse, other people like that through the pandemic were able to ride. You see a couple of them on the back. The neat thing about this float here was all organic. Everything you see on the Pelicans there, a lot of roses, but a lot of like shaved seeds. Everything has to be organic. You know, they're very environmentally friendly out there. There's not a lot of paper and plastic. Of course, there is rebar under a lot of the structures, but most of that was painstakingly put together in the 2 weeks prior to the January 1st float. A lot of fun. Again, everything you see was organic. And we don't think people are going to watch a parade and then call the travel agent. But what it is, it's top of mind awareness, sort of branding Louisiana. People are sitting on the couch during the holidays. What better time to start planning next year's vacation? So it's all part of the top of mind awareness that we try to put out there. We also, this last month, we had our Office of Tourism, one of the biggest office under Billy Nungesser's CRT, is they went to London for a trade show. We have 10 cabbies in and around London that are all wrapped in Louisiana-specific scenery. I think that's somewhere down in Cameron Parish, but 10 cabbies in London that are promoting Louisiana to get the international visitors and tourists back to Louisiana. So things like that. Also, during the pandemic, there wasn't a lot of travel. Our tourism industry, a lot of the CVBs, all the parishes had their own convention visitor bureaus. They were suffering. They just didn't have these attractions, hotels, as we all know. All you business owners, we all suffered. But the sports tourism, especially these ball fields, were really supporting a lot of the local areas. For example, Natchitoches, Youngsville, Ruston, Louisiana. I think that's a picture of Ruston. Those ballparks really buoyed tourism as far as hotel stays and some of the other restaurants. So tourism is a big deal in and around Louisiana. If you have kids play ball, you know that. A lot of travel associated with Louisiana sports. The logo up top is Team Louisiana. That's a cooperative amongst different CVBs, our Office of Tourism, pushing out Louisiana sports. Another one, the Final Four this past March. That was a hugely successful venue that kind of opened the doors and pulled back the curtains back on New Orleans in terms of we're back open. The March Madness was a big hit, those final 3 games, very huge. And then, of course, like I said earlier, in 25 days and about 6 hours, we will be kicking off the All-State Louisiana Kickoff in conjunction with the Sugar Bowl. So that'll be a big thing. We have sponsorship packages that we help these big entities in terms of supporting them, giving them money, because we want people to come from Tallahassee and all the Florida State fans, Louisiana. We don't want them just to come for the game. We want them to stay. We want them to spend the money. So you and I don't have to, but also, you know, it's good for jobs and good for the entire hospitality industry. Sports tourism, huge. Another thing Louisiana has is that's very unique is all of our fairs and festivals. I think there's close to 400 in and around the state. The Lieutenant Governor always says, if you can catch it, eat it, dance to it, we have a festival named after it. Then one of the new ones that's really a big hit is the Fried Chicken Festival in New Orleans. The Shrimp and Petroleum Festival, by the way, is coming up, I want to say, later in August, maybe. Does that sound right?
Labor Day.
My bad, Labor Day, September. As is the other one is the Gaydon Duck Festival, which is coming up at the end of this month. So it's all these small festivals all around the state. The Louisiana Association of Fairs and Festivals is a cooperative that's an association where all these fairs and festivals join, and it helps promote each one of these. Not everybody has a lot of money to promote all these fairs and festivals, but they really kick off in the fall and in the spring when the weather's a little bit more conducive to getting out to Louisiana. There's not a lot in July and August, rightly so. But I suggest hitting the Louisiana Association. The acronym is LAUGH. You hit that up, and there is basically a festival or fair in every portion of the state throughout the outside of the summer months. A couple of my favorite, I don't know any other state that has a frog festival. And then you have that's in May, the Rain Frog Festival. They actually jump the frogs. The other one I like is the Zwolle Tamale Festival up in the northwest corner. Excellent tamales in Zwolle. A lot of these guys look for money. A lot of these festivals look for money from our Office of Tourism. And we have something called a competitive grant program where they'll put up half the money and we'll give them some money as far as promotion and marketing. So I think we've given out like $1.1 million in the last 3 years to help a lot of these agencies and outfits, festivals promote their local, because a lot of these small towns, they really depend on this right here. I mean, all the vendors, they depend on all the fairs and festivals. One of the things they do out there, they serve a lot of delicious food. I mean, you have your regular food from there, but you also have a lot of stuff that's indigenous to Louisiana, really good. Speaking of food, this is some food places off the beaten path. I spend a lot of time on the road. I'd much rather eat at a gas station than at a fast food restaurant. Here's a couple right here.
They were a crazy kid. Have gas station, have slaughterhouse, and serve food. Gator sausage, deer sausage, jalapeno garlic. I sell a ton of boudin one. Literally. A ton. 1 ton a month.
We very friendly in Southwest Louisiana. We're proud of our foods here. If you have something around here that we call it a 7-course meal, it's a pound of boudin and a 6-pack. Southwest corner of Romance. Got it. These cooks get in every morning and serve breakfast for the working people around here. But they really shine at lunchtime. The food is first rate, the people are first rate, and they put a lot of pride in supporting the community and they do a great job.
As most of y'all know, those places are all over Louisiana. I'm sure everybody has a couple of their favorites. The boudin and the cracklings, I mean, those things have blown up in Louisiana, haven't they? You can't go anywhere. Every part of the state has their own little Cajun name, and especially Exit 97 in Scott, Louisiana, right? It used to be the best stop just a little north of there, and then now there's Karchner's opened up a drive-through south of that. You have Billy's, you have Don's. They're all over that stop. You can't, in fact, they had Don's, maybe Don's first, and then Billy. They had a little roundabout to get to Don's, and then Billy's built one route right there on the roundabout. So there's no excuse for traveling west and not eating boudin, cracklings, or something like that. It's all over the state, and it's something unique, that we have in Louisiana. Other states have a lot of burgers and other things, but we have, as y'all know, the real good food. Speaking of around the state, the trails and byways. I think there's about 19 of them in the state. We're working on a couple more. So these trails and byways are ways you can see the state, in particular one genre, if you will, or something to that effect. We have a boom or bust, Louisiana River Road, the Zydeco, the Cajun. I think there's, like I said, 19. We're working on a birding trail right now. There's a blues music trail, another music trail. It's all on, LouisianaByways.com, and there's 19 of these. 18 of them you can drive your car through, make the stops. There's a movie trail. big movie trail. They filmed the first Tarzan down in Morgan City, and there's some other famous movie stops in and around Louisiana. But a good friend of mine actually produced a lot of these videos on these byways and trails. Bill Rodman, who's a excellent photojournalist, if y'all know Bill Rodman, used to be at Channel 9. He put some of these together. This one here is the Bayou Teche one down in Lafayette Parish. Really interesting. So again, 19 of those, there's your website to go frequent. We have a month left before, like I said, football. Go see Louisiana via the trails and byways. Speaking of trails, on a different note, and a much more serious note, a couple years ago, the Lieutenant Governor talked about becoming part of the Alabama spearheaded it, the state of Alabama, their tourism commission. But the Civil Rights Trail was real big. He wanted Louisiana to be a part of it. And we are now. We have now unveiled 6 markers throughout the state, and there's about 12, 15 more we have yet to unveil. We're actually doing one tomorrow at the Bob Hicks House in Bogalusa. Robert Hicks was a guy that really, in Bogalusa, if you know Louisiana and its history, that was the bastion of a lot of civil rights injustices up in those Florida parishes. And this guy stood up, he housed people, and he and his life and his family were under a lot of duress up there during the 60s in Bogalusa. Bob Hicks will be doing that tomorrow morning at a church memorializing him. But we've been around the whole state. Like I said, Dookie Chase, that big picture on your left, Dookie Chase's restaurant, that restaurant was actually used to serve food and do so in a covert way that with a lot of the civil rights talkers and so forth, civil rights leaders could eat there and eat good food in peace. And it warned, that was our first marker. Right here on the right, you have the Bogalusa to Baton Rouge March. You see the A.Z. Young Park. It's near the Pentagon and the state capitol. That marker's right there by the road. This march happened, I want to say, in the 65, something like that, in August, 105 miles from Bogalusa to Louisiana. I mentioned Bogalusa was a contentious area. We have 2 markers about that. But the whole idea here with these markers is to educate people. I mean, a lot of our past was not pretty. A lot of our stuff was really hard on a lot of our community. And this is a way to commemorate, memorialize, and pay honor to a lot of the bus boycott right here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, that predated the Montgomery bus boycott, happened at our old state capitol. A lot of people don't know that. But that march from Bogalusa to the capitol was all about going to the capitol and voicing equal rights. These markers also, they're made of steel, about 6.5, 7 foot tall. There's a QR code on the back. Just take a picture and it brings you to some websites to learn a little bit more. Like I said, this all happened and there's been a lot of lieutenant governors since the civil rights, but our lieutenant governor was the first one to really put something behind this and make it memorable. And then there's a tourism aspect to it, right? There's also that, not just educational. So we're real proud of those civil rights markers. All right, so back to some of the fun stuff. The Atchafalaya, that falls under the Lieutenant Governor's purview, the National Heritage Area. That Atchafalaya, which I know has been in the news lately, this is as far as speeding and so forth, but this Atchafalaya rest stop is right there in the middle of that, 18-mile span? And now it's a beautiful welcome center in the Atchafalaya. One of my coworkers mentioned, I think we'll see a lot more people stopping to make sure they hit the 18 minutes moving forward. So there's restrooms there, a lot of educational, interactive pieces there that you can stop in. And we've been passing it for years. It's high time to get down there and take a look at it. But the Atchafalaya, like I said, that heritage area encompasses about 14 parishes, 260,000 acres. It's the largest one in the country, and it's right here in our backyard, you know. And all we do is try to get over it as quick as possible. Another one of the rest stops that we have, well, welcome centers, we have about 9 of these. This is a brand new one in Vinton. And so while a lot of the younger generation, when they travel, they'll bring out Google, they'll bring out their smartphones, but a lot of people, A, like to use the bathroom, and secondly, they still like the brochure. They want something in their hand. And it's a way to stretch their legs, get out, let the dog use the bathroom. This Vinton one is world class. It has a boardwalk to go, you know, if you're traveling from California to Florida, it's a nice way to stretch the legs, see some of Louisiana. And we have this one in Vinton. We have, of course, Slidell. We have them at most of the main entry points throughout Louisiana. We even have one in West Feliciana. But our staff there, we have a lot of retirees work at our welcome centers, and it's really paramount that those that they get the word out about all there is to offer Louisiana. One of the bigger departments under Lieutenant Governor's office, and most of y'all already know this, Louisiana State Parks. This is huge. There are 21 state parks. There's also 18 historic sites, but a lot of those we can't man 24/7. The state parks are open 24/7. The closest one we have to here, that's a good, we have one right there in, what's the name of that? Tickfall State Park. Yep, but Boga Chitto, Chico, Sippermore down on the coast. This is Fontainebleau, by the way, right? How pretty is that? That's Lake Pontchartrain. These state parks are a gem in our state. And as far as having people come back to Louisiana or see our own, what we have to offer, they offer a lot. A little spot that we put together with the Office of State Parks.
Where else can you kayak under a canopy of moss-draped trees, or cozy up in a nook of towering cypress? Ride horseback down winding trails. Go with the flow of a lazy river, right the path less traveled. Where else can you be a world away, so close to home?
Louisiana State Park. We're ready for your adventure.
So as far as our state parks, when Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungesser took over, the general funds, as far as budget, helped pay for all of our state parks' operating costs. Today, I think there's 38% of the cost is now self-generated. So we've increased the prices a little bit. We've added splash pads, horseback, mountain bike, and we've added a lot of amenities to the state parks to get more people there. Our cabins, most of our cabins have granite countertops. I don't have granite countertops. We have some real nice facilities in terms of our state parks. If you hadn't been to one, I suggest you go to one. LouisianaStateParks.com is where you can go, especially in the fall. So again, 21 of them, they're all over. Boga Chitto near Franklinton had the horseback you saw. They have the tubing and things like that. One of the things the Lieutenant Governor's big on is having these public-private partnerships where we have private companies enter into agreement with our state parks to bring some sort of, it could be an ice machine, it could be zip lines, horseback riding. They get the majority of their fees. They just give us a portion. We have the land, we have the insurance, we have all that. They just foot the bill for the initial cost to get on there. One of the ones that's been a real big hit, one of the endeavors has been glamping. And it's hard to see right in the back of the fire there, but that is a raised high wall tent. And you don't, in other words, you can go to a state park if the cabins are all sold out, stay in one of these it comes with the fire pit, the chairs, again, the high wall tent, a sofa, not a sofa, a bed in there. I do suggest you go with someone you know well. There is a little portalet in there too, so make sure you're acquainted with your guest. But they're stationed throughout the state, and they're a big hit. This is where you don't have to purchase all the equipment, you don't have to borrow it. You can just go rent what they call the name of the company is Tinter. But rent it, and again, they're throughout the state. That's a big hit. We have some other, we call them P3, public-private partnerships that our state parks are taking part of. Bottom line is, between the efficiencies, raising a little bit of cost, adding amenities, our state parks are getting off the shoulders of our taxpayers in a major way and trending upward, and that's big news. Another program, Main Street Historic Preservation. This falls under the Louisiana Office of Cultural Development. Both of these paramount to revitalizing, revamping all the downtowns. If you travel to most of them around the state, you see cinder blocks and paint falling off. I mean, they're suffering. So a lot of this tax credits and grants go to help revitalize small communities throughout the state. Also, under our Office of Cultural Development, Archaeology. We have an Archaeology Department. This, I think, was in the back of Laura Plantation over there in St. John Parish. They were digging up some artifacts. Also, they've been in the news sometimes when these plants expand, like the one in Convent, and they find these old cemeteries, and so they call our Office of Archaeology. You don't hear about that a lot. And then our Division of Arts is really big. Speaking of arts, I wanted to commend this Rotary here for the sphere right there on the levee. It is really a neat piece of artwork. And I drive by that all the time. I know it was privately funded or with downtown development, but we do help companies, municipalities with things like that. But I notice a lot of people taking pictures inside that sphere. I've taken pictures for different periodicals that we, and magazines, so kudos to you guys. Another Office of State Museums, we have 9 of them. I know everybody loves the St. Louis Cathedral, flanking on both sides, both the Presbytery and Cabildo. They have some of the world-renowned exhibits, wrecks, cabinet makers. They have a full-time, the Katrina, post-Katrina. It's all pretty impressive as far as exhibits. They have something called the 1850 House right there in Lower Pentawba. You get to see what it was like in 1850, and then knock on the wood that we're not there anymore. State Library of Louisiana, you pass it every time you go to the state capitol. Our state library is a huge, beautiful building, but more importantly, a little picture up to your left, I think, is the Eunice Public Library. They really facilitate and help all the libraries throughout the state, and so it's paramount. We have a lot more resources than the small ones. We reach out. We also have a Braille and audio book program where we mail out a lot of our books. State Library is one of the more important departments under our office. Louisiana Seafood, it came from the, it used to be under Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries. It moved to the Lieutenant Governor's office not that many years ago. All about promoting seafood, all about promoting seafood. Most of us here in Louisiana know how good it is, but a lot of what we do is, for example, last weekend I was in New Orleans with the Great American Seafood Cook-Off. That young lady there in the middle was from Massachusetts. We had 14 chefs from across the country come down and vie for top chef here in Louisiana. They had to use seafood. She used some, I believe, cod from Massachusetts. She also found some seaweed and other little vegetation from the rocks, and it was really pretty impressive. But apparently it was good. So she took home the top prize there. Prior to that, we had something called the Louisiana Seafood Cook-Off. We had that in Lafayette at the Cajun Dome. That was all about finding the best chef here in Louisiana, Amanda, and she was from Lake Charles. She ended up vying for this one, but didn't take it home. All right, we're wrapping up our departments, guys, so bear with me a few more minutes. Volunteer Louisiana, it's sort of a clearing place post-storm. But it's a 12-month a year program as far as AmeriCorps, building ramps, helping with houses for people in need. But post-storm is really when you hear a lot about Volunteer Louisiana, sort of a clearinghouse for matching faith-based organizations, matching groups, organizations to come to Louisiana and find those people in need. And so volunteerlouisiana.gov, if you have time, if you're interested in helping after the next natural disaster, feel free to tap into that. Finally, this is the last thing I'll talk about today, but it's really important. Keep Louisiana Beautiful fell under Lieutenant Governor's office within the last year. And as we all know, I mean, if we had a show of hands, everybody in here thinks Baton Rouge, Louisiana could get cleaned up, right? Yeah. And I know Baton Rouge here, and I forget her name. Somebody may have to yell out, what's her name? Marie Constantine, huge with the water and byways. I know Marine. And then there's also the Tiger Town, Jennifer Richardson. I mean, they're out there. They're doing it. The other day I was in one of the clover leafs at the I-10, I-12 span, and they had 6 or 7 buggies. They had a walker. I think they had all kind of stuff. So we've taken this office over, and it's paramount that we start cleaning up Louisiana. Billy always says that if you don't invite people over to your house until you clean your house. We've got to get Louisiana clean. And since April, I've seen a little bit of a difference. And my son, who's sitting over here, will tell you that when I see people throwing trash out their litter, it's all I can do not to get in a situation on the road. And I know, yeah. So yeah, it burns me up. But Keep Louisiana Beautiful is one of our programs that we can all get behind. So in April, we had Love to Boot Week. By the way, this photo is from Plaquemines Parish when the Lieutenant Governor was parish president. And he put up these trash cans on an angle on Highway 23. And he says only about 70% of the trash made it in. But it was a lot easier to clean this little spot up all along that Highway 23 than having trash all over the parish roads. So with that kind of initiative, with that strategy he's bringing to Louisiana, there's Love the Boot Week. We had over 300 groups around Louisiana. I know Maria and Ms. Richardson, I know they were out all the time. So keeping Louisiana beautiful is really paramount and something we're all behind. Finally, this is the last video, and I'm gonna wrap up. The Lieutenant Governor and Governor teamed up. That's right, we had the Democrat and Republic team up for a little message about litter.
It's a little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. It's a little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. It's a little light of mine.
Louisiana, it's time to put the paradise back in our sportsman's paradise. Visit letlouisianashine.org to keep Louisiana beautiful.
Let it shine.
There you have it. Here's a 20-minute condensed version of the Culture, Recreation, and Tourism Department. Thank you all so much. I'm told we have time for some questions, so if anybody would like to ask a question, grab a microphone, don't be bashful. Or you don't have to grab a mic. I will be happy to say the question. Massachusetts.
No, that's not right. It's like salsa in New York.
How has crime in New Orleans affected tourism and the image of the state, and what are you all doing to work on that?
Well, that I could spend another 30 minutes on that. I can't probably, but Billy could, the Lieutenant Governor. Crime is huge with New Orleans. I'm gonna give you an example. In fact, I was just there for 3 days. This is just my personal 3 days last week with Gasco. I went to White Linen Night. I walked. I didn't have one problem. Didn't have one issue walking by myself around downtown New Orleans. But I know, and I read the papers, I see it. They make headlines with the shootings and the crime. We posted something on social media the other day about a new museum. 45 to 47 of the posts were about how don't go to New Orleans without your Glock, without your AR, without whatever it is. I mean, it's happening. It happens. It grabs the headlines. I go to New Orleans all the time. I love that. That's where I'm from. I love that city. And it's such a shame what's going on. The Lieutenant Governor's working as best he can, and would he, his responsibility. I mean, he has statutory dedications, what he has to do. Crime might not be one of them, but crime affects tourism, right? And he's working with the Mayor Cantrell down there, working with the City Council, and the City Council's working on that. I mean, Romero, I forget her name, I know she's Marino Romero, she's really big on fighting crime, as is, most of the people do. Just like in Baton Rouge, a lot of that is gang stuff. You hear about the tourists, and occasionally something happens to them, but I have yet to find an issue with New Orleans. I still love New Orleans. That is the cash cow of our tourism. People come to New Orleans. They're not going to Vacherie. They're not going to Sabine Parish. Most of them come to New Orleans. That's where all this tax money, I said, that they're coming there. And then they'll frequent out to the river parishes, the historic homes. They'll come to Baton Rouge. But to answer your question, it's an issue, and everybody knows New Orleans has an image issue right now. But the sporting events, the things are still going on there, and hopefully at some point, I don't know what the answer is. Anybody else? All right. Well, I thank y'all. Appreciate y'all's time.
Thank you, Bill.